And I was like, I don't do that. I do it a lot. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Just another struggling writer. The beleaguered author's one-stop shop for commiseration and hopefully inspiration. My name is Carrie Scher, and I am just another struggling writer. Well, first of all, let me apologize for all of this. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I have been sitting on this video for about a week and a half now, and I don't want to wait any longer. Today I am bringing you another 3 by 3 by 3, this time discussing tropes. But first, a point of order. Last time I did this video, I talked about authors, and afterwards, as I was editing it, I realized it wasn't really a 3 by 3 by 3, it was more like a 3 by 3 because I had 3 categories and I named 3 authors in those categories. And I realized to have 3 by 3 by 3, I needed a third layer. So that's what we'll be doing today. We'll have 3 categories, 3 subcategories, and then 3 answers for each of those subcategories. So it'll be a little bit longer, but I think it'll make it a little bit more fun this way. So as I mentioned, this time we are talking about tropes. A trope is an element of writing or any kind of storytelling that it's just a common theme found throughout media. Lately, in the past couple of years, there has been a phenomenon that is widely being called tropification of writing and reading, where readers are seeking out specific tropes in their books and writers are catering to that desire. I personally love tropes. One of my favorite things to do whenever I consume a new piece of media is go to tvtropes.org and read the entire page and all of the entries for it. I find it really fun, and it also informs that there really isn't any new ideas, but that's okay. And it makes me comfortable to tap into some of those tropes, subvert them, play them straight, lampshade them, all of that. I find them to be instructive and fun and playful, but I can also see how catering your writing to them can also end up being problematic, and you're not really serving your readers by doing that either. So I see both sides of it, but this is not a video discussing the merits or downsides of tropes or tropification. This is more about my opinions on certain tropes. So as I mentioned, we've got 3 categories. The 3 categories are tropes I love, tropes I feel neutral on, could take or leave them, and then of course tropes that I hate. In each category, we have 3 subcategories, and those are going to be tropes I have read, tropes I have written, and unpopular opinions. So we'll get a little bit spicy today. We'll start at the top with tropes that I love. And as you can imagine, this one was, I filled out really easily because there are just so many great tropes out there. It was hard to kind of narrow them down to just 3 in each category, but these are my top 3. So tropes that I love to read. The first one, and this is kind of a new revelation for me, but I realized that I really do love it. And that is when you have a very grumpy or even violent girl who, through circumstances, has been on her own or separated from society or having to rely only on herself when she discovers the power of friendship. I eat that shit up. And specifically, I am thinking of 2 books. The first is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence, which is one of my favorite books that I've read when I started reading again a couple years ago. And the other one being A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. And in both of these books, we have these girls who are prickly, keep people at arm's length. In Red Sister's case, a little bit violent, a little bit quick to anger, but through circumstances, they find friendship, and those bonds of friendship mean so much to them because of their ostracization, because they are ostracized from the rest of society for various reasons. So those bonds, that friendship, I love it. I love it. Give me more of that. And I love it especially when it's female friendships between women, because so often women are pitted against each other in media, and so when they are shown being forging bonds and being close with one another, I think that's really important. And so I love that trope. If you have book recommendations that feature that trope, let me know. The second trope isn't really a trope, but it is political intrigue or machinations or anything to do with the politics of any given organization. It doesn't have to be the government or whatever. It could be like internal politics of an organization or even like a school. But when people are maneuvering and having to outwit each other, not violently, but using their cleverness and power structures to get their own ends, I love it. I love the intrigue. I love watching people try to outmaneuver each other. I love watching people who are too powerful and too comfortable in their power fall. A big one would be like the Game of Thrones series, but I also really love like the Robin Hobb series. Anything that features those political maneuverings as a feature, as something that is heavily involved in the plot, I love it. I do. And then the third trope that I love to read, and again, I don't know if this really counts as a trope, but I love science fantasy settings. I'm going to go back to Red Sister and the Book of the Ancestors series by Mark Lawrence. That features a world that is very much fantasy. It's very much, there's magic involved, but the world, as you read on and as you gather context clues about the world, you learn that the people living on this planet are aliens. They were brought here by a spaceship because some sort of disaster happened to their original planet, but this planet is also not necessarily fit for human life because the sun is dying, and so it is very weak, and this planet is slowly becoming a complete ice planet. And to combat that, these progenitors, these people who brought the people on their spaceship, launched a satellite that is basically a big mirror to focus the power of the sun and create a strip of habitable land for these people. And that is so cool. It's not really, it's part of the plot, but it's not a huge part. And like I said, you put this together through context clues. It's not something that's in the text that is on the page, like talked about. It's something that you kind of learn. Another great science fantasy setting is, okay, let's try that again. Another great example of the science fantasy setting is the Gideon the Ninth series by Tamsin Muir. It is set in space. There are different planets and space travel and certain elements of technology, but there's also magic. And I love the way that Tamsin Muir blends the two together. My caveat with this one is that I am not as such a huge fan of fantasy that is not really fantasy, it's technology the whole time. I truly love the blend where it's truly magic and technology together. There is that. Like, if you find out the whole time that it's just machines or, electricity or whatever that is the magic, I don't love that as much. So those are the three tropes that I like to read, three tropes that I love to write. And this first one might be a little controversial, and I've only recently discovered it about myself when I was watching another person's video who was ranking tropes, and they had this one pretty low, and I was like, I don't do that. I do it a lot actually, and that is amnesia. As it turns out, I love writing in an amnesia plot. It features in, let's see, at least one idea that I've attempted to write in the past. No, two, plus at least three, like a total of 5 different story ideas. None of them have been written to completion, but I guess I just love an amnesia plot. And I can see where people would be not such fans of this because it is a cheap way out from revealing any information or keeping secrets. But maybe that's who I am as a writer. Maybe I'm just looking for the easy way out. But I just like the element of a character like truly being lost, like that anxiety of being in a character's head who literally can't access their memories. I love that sort of tension. I also love the mistrust that it builds between other characters because how do you know they're telling the truth, or is it really true, or who were they in the past? I really do love that dynamic, and yeah, I guess I just love it. No matter how cheap and easy it is as a trope, it's mine. Another trope that I have always been aware features a lot in my writing is absent or apathetic but very real gods, like a pantheon of gods who are tangible and are real but have withdrawn or don't care really about their people. That features a lot, again, and probably like 4 or 5 of my story ideas. The key there being that the people know that they're real. maybe they were on Earth at one point and interacted with people, and it's still within recent enough memory or enshrined in enough history that it is accepted as fact that they are real, but they no longer have their fingers in the pot, either because they are gone or because they don't care anymore. I find that a interesting slice of backstory, and it may be something that is plot relevant or it may just be flavor, but either way, I enjoy those sorts of pantheons where they are definitely real, but they are definitely not involved anymore. And lastly, I love unique fantasy races. And by unique, I don't mean never been done before. I just mean ones that are not the typical. I don't mean elves. I don't mean fairies. I don't mean vampires, but unique fantastical races that are set apart. I have a major story idea that is a hot mess that is way too long and features way too many characters, way too many plots, and it will only ever get written if I become an established author because no agent will ever take it on otherwise. And it features a ton of these different fantasy races that are not the typical. One of the books that I really struggled with reading, I ended up DNFing it, but one of the things I liked about it was the fantasy races was The Sun and the Void by Gabriela Romero Lacruz. That is kind of what I am looking for in fantasy races, something completely different, something we don't see too often. I'm also actively seeking out books that have different types of fairies, not like the fairies that we're used to seeing nowadays, but different kinds of fairies, different kinds of dryads or water nymphs. I'm looking for things like that to read because I'm just more interested in seeing something that outside of what has been popularized. And I know that if they get too popular, then the same thing will happen, but that's kind of what I'm looking for. Bird people and cat people and lizard people. Give me all the unique fantasy races. Give me people with antlers. Give me people with cloven hooves. Give me people with tails. Give me people with cat eyes. Give me those. I want unique fantasy races. And so I'm writing one, or I will one day if I ever get established. Okay, and now we are up to our first round of unpopular opinions. Strap in, folks. This was not on purpose, but all three of these ones that I like are romance-forward tropes, which is so funny because I don't read a ton of romance. I will dabble in romantasy as I come across it and as I'm intrigued by the plot, but romance isn't something I am reading a ton of. But the romance genre is also one of the areas where you hear about tropification the most. So when I was mulling over tropes, a lot of them were romance forward. So as such, a lot of my unpopular opinions especially are romance related. Let's get started with a spicy one. Unpopular opinions, and remember this main category is tropes that I love. Unpopular opinion, I like fated mates. Caveats though. I don't like the word mate. I'm with you on that. Terrible. And I don't actually read any sort of paranormal romance where I believe that this term is mostly associated with. When I think of fated mates, I think of two people who, through whatever reason or whatever circumstances, have some kind of supernatural or magical bond forged between them, especially when it is when they're victims of circumstances or when it's not entirely they wouldn't have chosen that, but they have to because of reasons, and they are linked together magically or whatever. Those are the kinds of stories that I like. And as you progress through the story and as these two people are forced to work together or accomplish a goal, or they are gradually growing closer and they are questioning, are these feelings I'm developing because of the bond, or is it because of the person? And are these feelings real, or are they a result of this magical bond that I did not choose? Oh my gosh. Yum, 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 yum. Give it to me. Give it to me. Give me all of those books. Every single one of them. I love it. One, I don't think this was a supernatural bond, but I really enjoyed the circumstances, what was it called? Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. The two characters early on get married. I can't remember if there's a supernatural bond, but that sort of thing where they did not want to get married, but they had to because of reasons, and this forces them into proximities, things like that. There was a book that I read last year that I really didn't like, but it had that element in it, and that was the only reason I finished it. I love that. And mostly I love that question that I mentioned of, is this because of the bond, or am I actually developing feelings for this person? Love it. Give me more of that. None of that shifter romance werewolf stuff. Not as interested in that. But this other part, yes, please write more of it. Next up, another romance related one, and that is slow burn. And I'm talking slow burn. I love slow burn, proper slow burn. And since I'm a fantasy reader, and if you are writing a series and there was a romantic subplot, the kind of slow burn I want is they better not even kiss until at least the second book. They better not get together until the very end finale, like the climax of the whole series. That's what I'm talking about, slow burn. The slower the better. Give me the yearning, give me the tension, give me the ups and downs, give me all the reasons why they can't be together, be it physical distance or opposite sides of a conflict or cultural taboos. I don't care. Slow burn. Give me two people who are attracted to each other, maybe not at first, but for whatever reason, it draws it out as much as possible. That's what I want. If they are getting together at the end of the first book, to me, that's not a slow burn. And I get like this is a romance trope, and so a lot of romances are only one book long, so I get it. That's not the typical, but as a fantasy writer, if you have a romantic subplot, draw it out for me, baby. Make them suffer for it. I do not want to read 200 pages of yearning and then they get together and then it's just like, there's nothing left. There's like, sure, there's the ostensibly plot stuff going on, but like the tension between the two characters is simply not as interesting after they've gotten together. I prefer the yearning. I prefer the not knowing, the will they, won't they, the questions between them of, is this right? Can we do this? Is it okay? Is it the right time? Is it selfish of us to indulge in this feeling that we have when all this crazy shit is going on? Remembering that I like fantasy and usually there's crazy shit going on. That's what I want. If they are getting together at the end of the first book, it's not slow enough for me. And lastly, unpopular opinion, I really don't mind insta-love. And again, a caveat, because I think that that insta-love is often used as an umbrella term and as such is misdefined a lot of times. A lot of times when two characters meet and there's attraction and they want each other, or maybe they hook up at the beginning and then the rest of the story is about why they can't be together, whatever. I don't think that's insta-love. I think you could call it insta-lust, but I hate to break it to you, people feel lust for each other at first sight sometimes, or within their first meeting. That's just human nature. So I don't really find that cringy or awful when two characters meet and there's instant attraction and instant chemistry. That's just sometimes how it happens. A good example of this is A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. The two romantic interests in that book, they immediately are flirting and bantering, and it kind of you can kind of see where it's going from their very first meeting. And I don't really mind that at all. I think that's just real life. Sometimes you meet someone and there is an instant connection and there is lust, and not just lust. There is sometimes this person is a cool dude. This is a cool chick. I want to get to know them more. I like them. You're telling me you've never met a person and had an instant attraction to them, not physically, but their character and who they are, and you've never wanted to get to know them better based on your first meeting? Come on. So insta-love, love at first sight, yes, that is unrealistic and not likely to happen unless you have that magical bond thing that I talked about earlier, which, again, I'm not opposed to. I'm not talking about those situations. I'm specifically talking about, it's fine when a character meets someone and boom. I think that's fine. Again, this is a romance trope, and so I can see how in romance reading specifically it's not as fun because you want you want there to be tension and you want things to be drawn out a little bit more and you want there to be stakes and you want there to be plot. But in terms of fantasy and stuff, I don't see the instant love as such a problem, especially when there are a lot of times magical or supernatural things at play. Oh my gosh, this video is going to be 10,000 years long. So that is it for tropes that I love. Now we are going to move on to tropes that I could take or leave. I feel kind of meh about, or tropes that are great if they're done well, but are oftentimes done really badly, and so it leaves me feeling kind of meh. Again, starting with 3 tropes that I have read. The first one, maybe controversial, heists. Meh. I'm not mad at them. I'm not gonna put a book down because it sprung a heist on me. A lot of times it's a feature for a lot of readers, so it's touted. So I know what I'm getting into, but I'm not like reading, oh, this has a heist, I need to read this book. It's just sort of whatever. It's fine. It's a fine way to move a plot, or like the main crux of the plot. One of my favorite books that I read this year was a heist, kind of a heisty book. That would be Foundry Side by Robert Jackson Bennett. Love that book, but I didn't love it because of the heist necessarily. Another book that I feel neutral on that a lot of people love is Six of Crows. Again, the reasons I feel neutral on it are not because of the heist. I do feel neutral on the heist, but like the reason I don't love it as much as everyone else does is because of other reasons, not necessarily the heist. I just don't get excited for them. I'm not like mad at them. I just don't get up for them. In a similar vein, books about books, which is interesting because I'm a writer and I love books and I'm thinking about books constantly, both the ones that I'm writing and the ones that I'm reading. But when you give me a book that's about a book, or about magical books, or about a book that is like important to a person, nah, whatever. It doesn't excite me. One example would be, a book that I hated this year, Starling House, heavily featured a book that ended up at the very end being very plot relevant, but I sort of was like, whatever. I hated that book for other reasons, but yeah, whatever. Kind of meh. Another one that I didn't really love too much was Ink, Blood, Sister, Scribe. In that book, I liked the concept of the magical books. The plot really failed me. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but again, like, I have yet to read a book about books, or about a library, or about magical books, or anything like that I was like, whoa, this is great, and this concept is why it's great. Another one, and this again might be unpopular, but tournaments or competitions, fine. They're fine. Again, like the heists, I can see how they are useful for structuring a plot, and an easy way to build tension and to raise the stakes. Yeah, they're just fine to me. Again, I'm not seeking them out. I think an unfortunate side effect of the Hunger Games blowing up in popularity was that everyone wants to do it, but no one can really do it the same way, or with the same like sort of feeling that we got when we read the Hunger Games. And now to show like, yes, you're forced into this competition and you have to kill or be killed. And I don't care anymore. I guess you could say that I think it's overdone. I might even go out of my way a little bit to avoid books if that is the only thing it has going for it. Give me something different when you're introducing a tournament or a competition. Like, I was just reading The Jasad Heir, and I really felt that competition was completely unnecessary for what the plot was trying to do. Like, completely. On the other hand, I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and I heard some people really didn't like it because it was unrealistic, but I thought that was great. I thought that was a great structure for that book. I gave it a 3 because I thought it was just sort of a trite vampire romance, but the competition structure itself, I thought it was interesting to see how someone who was lacking in the skills of her competitors tried to outsmart and use what she was good at against them. If it's done well, great, but a lot of times it's just so overdone. Okay, so those are tropes that I have read. What about tropes that I have written that I feel neutral about? One is the chosen one trope. Very, very common in fantasy, especially. You almost can't avoid it in some ways. At least not like in terms of like if you're trying to broaden your reading, you're gonna read one probably every 5 or 6 books that you pick up is gonna have a chosen one trope in some way, shape, or form. I myself have done it a little bit. I've played with it. My current book is kind of a variation of it where she's not the chosen one, but she does have a rare ability, and she is the only one that they can find at the moment who can really help them out. I've done you are the one. You have to do this specifically. There is no one else. This is your birthright. This was passed down to you, etc. I like when books play with that. I know there was a book a while back that I DNF'd. What was it called? The Fate of the Fallen or something, where the chosen one dies really, really early on, apparently. I didn't get to this part because I hated it, but the chosen one dies really, really early on, and their best friend has to like kind of take up their quest. I love that concept. That book failed in execution completely for me, but that's a great concept. Play with it. The thing about tropes is that they can be played straight. They can be subverted, they can be completely avoided, they can be played with. And one of the greatest things is when you go into a book expecting a trope, and it is completely different from what you expected. So I don't know that I achieved that in my writing, but I've definitely toyed with the concept. Another one is the training montage. I actually try to avoid writing them because I don't find them to be very interesting. I can see, like, in some ways they can be, and they are very useful shorthand to introducing a reader to a world or a situation that the POV character is also being introduced to. My current project has a iteration of the training montage, so I definitely see how it is useful. But again, I just don't get excited. I'm not like, I don't know how long I haven't had sound. Let's stop and find out. Okay, I don't know how long I was without sound, so editing Carrie is going to have to help you out with whatever you missed. But what I was saying is I would be interested to know the percentage of writers who use epigraphs as a way to foreshadow or misdirect or tease their readers, because again, I skip them a lot. So am I missing anything by skipping them? I truly don't know. I feel like I don't, because if it was important to the plot, it would be in the narrative, not in the epigraph. But I'd be interested to see some, like, a survey of how many readers actually read them and how many writers use them as like a way to foreshadow or even misdirect readers. All right, and now we're into unpopular opinions. So once again, strap in because these might shock you. The first unpopular opinion trope I could take or leave is found family. Again, just like some of the others in this category, a lot of times I feel like it is used too broadly as a term. If a group of people go on a quest together, I don't necessarily the quest itself or the fact that they go on it together makes it a found family. Like, you have to really put in the work to make a group of people a found family. You have to do the work to make those bonds unbreakable, to make them truly a unit that would go to the ends of the earth for each other. I just don't, I see it a lot, and I just don't feel like that is always true. I feel like it's more like unexpected friendship, which, as we talked about at the very beginning, I love when friendship is a plot or is an element of the character's development. I just don't think found family is utilized in the way a lot of writers or a lot of readers think it's being utilized. And it's one of those tropes that have become so broad, like the term is so broad, it's almost meaningless now. So again, I find that, like, when I read a book that said, oh, it's found family, it's more like, oh, these people had to work together for reasons and now they are friends. Or because of the circumstances they went through, they will always share a bond, but it is not like, through thick and thin, through like they will do anything for each other. I think it's more like, wow, we went through some shit, we saw some shit together, damn. And if that's what readers like as found family, maybe that's enough for them. But for me, I need that, like, truly unbreakable bond for it to be a found family. I mentioned Six of Crows earlier. I don't see that group as being a found family. Am I crazy for thinking that? I see them all as friends that would, definitely, like, stick up for each other, but I don't see, like, Inej and Jesper, like, being a family unit, especially since there's so much, like, romantic tension within the group itself. I don't see that as a found family. Am I crazy for saying that? Next up is fantastical creatures, and the key one here being dragons. Sure, fine. I have yet to read a book where the dragons are super exciting and interesting, or a part of the book that I, like, find makes the book for me. It really drives my interest. It makes it better. I know dragon books are very popular right now, and I'm trying to find one that speaks to me, but so far it's been pretty hit or miss. I'm also I'm looking specifically for phoenix books, because phoenixes are my favorite mythological creature. I have one tattooed on my back, so I am looking for phoenix books. I have the Phoenix Keeper. I had the Phoenix Keeper. on hold from the library, but my hold expired and I never got to it, so I have to get back to that. But I understand that's more cozy fantasy, so I don't know if that's going to be really to my taste. And then there's something called The Phoenix King that I have no idea what it's about. It just has Phoenix in the title. And then I believe The Night Ends with Fire has a Phoenix in it as well. So looking for Phoenix books. If you know of any where the Phoenix is a thing, let me know. Not that one. Not that one. Oh, this one's kind of spicy. I forgot about this one. My last unpopular opinion on things that I don't mind or could take or leave or just feel kind of whatever about is anachronisms. For the most part, they do not bother me. I am not going, clocks weren't invented in 1682 when this setting is clearly based on. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care if the word bitch wasn't used colloquially until the 1700s. I don't care. I don't know. I don't care. Now, if we're talking like super modern lingo or slang, like then it becomes a distraction. Like I'm not like in the middle of a medieval fantasy, and if they say that's a big mood, that will take me out of it, sure. But like I'm talking about like modern slang, super modern lingo. But if we're talking like if someone in a fantasy book talks about coffee, I'm not going, well, how coffee was invented in Colombia, how the Colombia doesn't exist in this world. I don't care. There's going to be a couple of things where I can see it being like specifically a problem, like champagne is a proper noun. It is not a generic term. I can see that being kind of irritating, but for the most part, like I don't care about certain anachronisms. I don't care if a character has glasses. Well, how would they have glasses when the technology in this world clearly doesn't account for crafting specific lenses for, I don't care. I really don't care. They don't bother me at all. I'm not looking up like when things were invented and being like, this doesn't make sense. I don't care. Part of the great thing about fantasy is that you are creating a custom built world. And in your custom built world, if coffee is a thing, fine, great, I love it. Coffee is a thing. I don't feel like authors have to explain themselves if they want to have the word coffee and have it be exactly what it is in the real world, because then I feel like you go on a slippery slope of, well, this character's name is Jessica and Jessica is specifically an English name. Like, I don't care. I don't care. You're gonna find problems with every other word in the English language in that book, if that's the approach you're going to take. Just make like Elsa and let it go. I'm begging you. All right, y'all, we're in the home stretch. We are down to tropes that I hate. This one took me a while because there are probably a dozen tropes that I hate reading, but very, very few tropes that I hate that I've actually written before, because why would I write tropes that I hate? This will be interesting because I had to stretch the definition a little bit. Number one shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's watched a lot of my videos. The number one trope that I hate, number one in the world, is when a female protagonist is described in the narrative or by other characters as being exceptionally bright or clever or witty or smart, and then their actions throughout the narrative prove otherwise. And this usually boils down to the author wanting their female protagonist to stand out and to be smart, but being way too heavy-handed with the foreshadowing. I get that it's a delicate balance because you don't want the reader to feel like the ending comes out of nowhere. But if we know what's going on, if we can see what's going on, all that does is makes your exceptionally bright female protagonist look like she's dumber than a sack of hammers. And I hate it. If you're going to go that route, if you feel like you're struggling with that balance, just take the line out that describes her that way. You don't have to say it. You don't have to say it. It is not a failing on your part as a writer if your main female protagonist is not the sharpest tool in the shed. I promise you, it is okay. It just bothers me so much when that line is included, but there's no effort to show that they are exceptionally bright. And then you get the foreshadowing problem, and then it's just like, why didn't she see this coming? I saw it coming, and I know I'm not very bright. And yes, I know media literacy and being a reader and a writer makes me a little bit more prone to figuring out clues before some other readers or writer, whatever. But I can't help it. It bothers me so much. It is so unnecessary. Just take the line out. You don't need to do it. She is worthy of being a main character. She is worthy of respect and dignity without being exceptionally bright. Just take it out of your manuscript. I'm begging you. Similarly, and this is more of a me problem than a book problem, I got into it in the comments a couple months ago because I made a point of complaining about this, but that is hyper competent teenagers. I specifically do not read YA because I don't enjoy reading about teenagers. I'm looking for more adult stories. The coming of age stuff is not really my bag. But my problem is when you get a YA and all of the teenage characters are hyper competent at what they do. Like, they're very specialized. They are the master. And although you could ask an adult who is probably just as good or better at the same skill, we just happen to know a 16-year-old who is the best. I'm looking at you, Six of Crows specifically. Yes, that was part of the reason I really did not like that book, because all like 5 or 6 or 8 of those characters were teenagers, and they were all like so good, like amazingly good. And I could buy 1 or 2, but all of them, really? A Tempest of Tea was like that too, which is what sent me on that rant before that got me in trouble with a commenter. And I was told, don't read YA if you don't like that trope. And it's like, okay, sorry. I suppose YA is a sort of wish fulfillment for teenagers, so maybe I should just stop reading it entirely. But I can read YA where the characters feel age appropriate. A great example of that is So Let Them Burn by Camilla Cole. Those characters felt very much their age, especially the main character, who was like forced into to being a child soldier when she was like 13. And so her personality, even though she has these magical powers granted to her, and so yes, she is hyper competent in that way, she's still very much a teenager. She still has very much teenage trains of thought, and like how she comes to decisions and whatnot. And I loved the characters in that book. They were my favorite part, actually. So I know that it's possible for YA writers to not rely so heavily on hyper competency as a trope, because then it becomes a point where it feels like you aged your characters down to fit into the category rather than writing about adults, which is what you really wanted to do. But because YA is such a booming category right now. Six of Crows. Ooh, I'm gonna get myself in trouble today. Oh, speaking of which, my last one here is, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but Sarah J. Maas' specific style of fairies. I'm tired of them. I'm so tired of them. If your book is about fairies in that vein, I am not reading it. I'm actively avoiding it, because a lot of times they're romantasy and a lot of times they're cookie cutter, and I get that people who are fans of that are looking for the cookie cutter, are looking for the formula of those books. Not for me, not me. Please leave me out of it. I'm not yucking anyone's yum. Please just leave me out of it. Which is not to say that I haven't read books with fairies in them that I haven't liked. I just read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Great. That's a great book. But the fairies were a little bit different. I also, the Stariel series by A.J. Lancaster, I really liked that. I guess if you're going to have fairies, I want you to include the full breadth of fae folk to make the existence of fairies a little bit makes more sense. But if they're just hot people with wings and magical powers, I'm over it. I'm so glad for SJM for getting her bag and everyone else who has jumped on that bandwagon, but I am not reading your books. I'm so sorry. Okay, so we're onto the section now that I really struggled with, and that is 3 tropes that I hate that I have actually written before. So it took me a long time to come up with these 3, so I don't even know if they count as tropes, but one thing I'm not such a fan of is when there is a large time jump, either in the book itself or in between entries. I like third person close as a narrative for a reason. I like staying with them and I like seeing their journey. And while I get, yes, there are times where there's going to be downtime in the action, especially if you're writing a long series, that it's not going to make sense to continue to follow them so closely. But it also makes me question, how important is this next segment? How important is it if it requires a 10-year time jump? I put this in tropes I have written. I haven't actually written it before. Again, I'm stretching the definition. I have an adventure fantasy story that I have conceived of as a standalone, but I could see myself writing it as a duology, but there would be a significant time jump. So I haven't written it, but I could see myself doing it. So who am I really, a hypocrite? Another one is ambiguous endings. When you reach the end of the quest, or the goal has been met, or maybe the protagonist needs to make a decision and it's never actually revealed what that decision is or what happens to them. Maybe they ride off into the maw of the dragon or whatever, and it's not clear what happens to them. Not such a huge fan. I do, again, I love being close to my character, or close to the POV characters and close to what is happening with them. So when there's questions in that way where it's unclear, there's no closure for me. I need to know. But again, I do have one planned for one of my series. Okay, and lastly, a major character death. I hate this less lately, but there was a time where if a major character died, I was done. I was not reading any further. A great example of this was when I tried to read Game of Thrones. It was right after the first season of the TV show ended, and I was like, I want to read these books. I am a big proponent of reading the books first. I was accidentally spoiled for the death at the end of the first season, and I could not read it. It was just like, I can't invest too much of my heart into something where the characters are treated that way. And so I just watched the show. Now, I've moved on a little bit past that, but it is still, like, again, I've mentioned it a couple times, I like to be very close with the characters. So when they're killed off, especially in a long series, it's just like, oh, well, that just teaches me I can't be close to the characters. I can't be too invested in them. I can't be too attached to them because they could die at any time. Again, I have so much respect for authors who do it. I have one of my very first projects that I ever wrote features a major character death. So I see it as the device that it is and having worth. But there was a time where I simply could not move on from it. Like I said, I'm better about it now. It does still affect the way that I engage with the material, especially as it relates to the characters. And because I'm so character driven, it affects me. We are down to my favorite part, least favorite part. The part that I knew immediately what was going in this category. It may get me in trouble. Unpopular opinions, tropes that I hate. I mentioned the first one before a little bit, coming of age. I'm sorry, I don't care. I am more interested in adult stories. I will read YA because I do think that YA has meaningful fantasy entries that are worth reading. But the main driving force behind a lot of YA, the coming of age, I don't care. I do not care. In fact, it is a net negative a lot of times on a story, but I also don't feel like I can completely not read them. I honestly feel like I aged out of the category when I was 19. I've mentioned this before. And the 7th and final book of the Boy Wizard series that shall not be named, that I was a big fan of at the time, came out, and I remember reading it. And I went to the midnight release and everything, and I was reading it overnight, and I was 19. And even then I was like, I feel too old for this. So I feel like I aged out even prematurely. My mom, for example, loves YA. She reads a lot of YA. She loves YA book to like film or TV show adaptations, loves them. So I know that there's appeal for people who are not specifically in the age category. I'm just not one of those people. All right, now we're getting spicy. Number 2, trope I hate. Unpopular opinion, will not buy your villain redemption arc. I'm just telling you right now, I don't like them. And with specific, like, if they die correcting their wrongs, maybe I'll be like, okay, that was a good ending. But you're never gonna get me on board with them having a redemption arc. I know, like, Zuko from Avatar is a big, like, example of this. I'm gonna shock you. I've never actually seen that show in its entirety. Again, I feel like I was too old for it when it was popular. My partner disagrees. He's the same age as me. It's one of his favorite series of all time. I just never got into it. But from an adult perspective, when you're telling an adult story, which Avatar is not, although there are adult themes, I understand. When you're telling an adult story, a villain usually does some pretty heinous shit. And I just can't forgive it. I just cannot. Unless there is, like, an equal sacrifice made to redeem themselves, which usually means death. So if you're writing a book and your goal is to be like, oh, show this person who is just misunderstood and they have killed people, but it's okay because they're really sorry about it or their circumstances force them into it. I just don't agree. I don't necessarily agree that there is circumstances where they had to be evil or they had to carry out heinous acts of violence or whatever, they had to. They never at any point had a real choice. I get that there's probably books out there that demonstrate it really well, but I just really struggle to get on board with a redemption arc for someone, for a character who, when we meet them, especially at the beginning, is unrepentantly evil or fervently believes in what they are doing is worth the destruction that they are wreaking. There are caveats, there are exceptions to every rule, but this is my rule. I'm not on board with a villain redemption arc 99% of the time, unless they die. Then it's fine. I love when characters I hate die. It's great. 10 out of 10. Which leads me into my last unpopular opinion, and I feel sometimes like I'm the only person on the internet who has this opinion, and if you haven't guessed it by now, buckle in. It's enemies to lovers. Fuck enemies to lovers. With the explanation that I like Found Family and like a few others on this list, I feel like the term is used too broadly. A guy that your main character doesn't like for 20 minutes is not her enemy. Enemies to lovers, to me, does not exist in a contemporary romance. An enemy is someone who has done you serious wrong. And this is why I think it goes more into fantasy or other things where the level of bad shit truly can categorize them as your enemy. And in those cases, I just find it hard to believe that you're going to fall in love with them later. You're going to forgive them for whatever heinous shit that they did to you or are responsible for or said to you or caused you to suffer. I just have a really hard time getting on board with it. What I was thinking over this list is, if you're thinking about the relationships I most love, my favorite ship of all time in any media, that's books, TV, movies, video games, anything, my favorite ship of all time is Commander Shepard and Garrus Vakarian from the Mass Effect video game series. And if you know anything about them, you would agree that they are pretty much the opposite of enemies to lovers. They are two people who respect each other and trust each other. And even when they disagree, there is a level of just their relationship is such that they don't let that worry them. They don't let that weigh on their relationship. And it is truly like based on respect, admiration, and trust, shared experiences, and going through the fire together. And so if you think of that as like my pinnacle of all relationships or shipping, enemies to lovers could not be more different. So yes, I hate it. I'm very rarely going to get on board with an enemies to lovers unless it is very slow burn, like we talked about earlier, and unless the enemy character truly has like a really good reason for whatever bullshit that they pulled that harmed the main character. Okay, my camera battery died, but all I was trying to say is that I feel like the popularity of this trope is due to how broadly it is used, and again, to the point where it is almost meaningless. I'm not really such a fan of especially female characters hooking up with male characters who deliberately cause them suffering in the past. To me, that takes a lot of work in the narrative and character growth wise that just isn't really given to these types of narratives in the current climate. And again, that is because the term is so broad, where two characters simply don't have to like each other at the beginning of the narrative for it to earn the enemies to lovers label. And that, I think, does a disservice to the authors and the readers. So that's my gripe on that. The literal definition, I'm not a fan of. I'm typically not a fan of the broader definition either. Again, I refer you back to Garrus and Shepard. My favorite ships are based on admiration and respect and trust. And yes, you could have elements of those in an enemies to lovers, but the other part of their relationship that I really like is just the loyalty that they have for one another, even through disagreements and dark moments in their character arcs. So I just don't think that you'll find that as meaningfully in a real enemies to lovers story. Oh my gosh, this video is gonna be so long, but thank you so much for watching. Tell me, please, which one of these opinions you agree with or disagree with in the comments. I know I had some spicy takes in there. The tropification, I don't mind it as much, except when the trope is used so broadly that it becomes kind of divorced from its actual meaning. And yet the climate right now is such that authors kind of have to pander to those expectations and those tropes in order to sell. And that is a broader industry issue that I frankly don't have the camera battery for today. But again, I love having discussions. I love to get into it with people. Tell me which one of these tropes is your favorite, and tell me which ones you would cancel me over in the comments. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I so appreciate it. If you like my content and want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. In my next video, I will have my weekly writing vlog for you, and it has been another rough one because I've just been sick and just circumstances have not been very conducive to writing, but I am powering through it, and I hope you look forward to it, and I will see you then. Bye.